Hello, my name is Officer Letitia Paisley, and I will be reading chapter 33 for you. And it starts out with goo. Teresa didn't know what to do. She certainly didn't want to become like John. She had to do something to help him. But what? The blob had him. She tried to think as she watched him struggle within the hungry gelatin. John was not made of plastic, but his mouth and nose were filling with green goo. He would suffocate if he stayed in there much longer. The blob quivered in place as John rolled over and over, trying to find his way free. Stick your hands out, she yelled at him, but his ears were probably clogged with too much slime to hear. John kept turning and twisting and was soon upside down. Okay, she told herself, I'm just going to have to do this. It won't eat my flesh, right? Knowing she might get stuck herself, Teresa closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and then thrust her hands into the green goo. She grabbed John's wrist and pulled with all her might. He came tumbling out onto the floor, slime from head to toe. He spat out the green goo, pulling it from his mouth, his ears, and his nose. Super gross, he said, wiping the rest of it off of his face. Teresa stretched her fingers out and let the plastic-eating goo drip away. It was rather sticky, but at least it didn't seem to be eating her. Having consumed all the plastic that had fallen into its lair, the giant blob retreated to a far corner, munching greedily on Charlie Ann's purple boots. For a second, Teresa felt bad for it, as if it were a hungry, lonely pet with no one to play with. She wished she had something more to feed it. John wasn't as sympathetic as he was far more slimy. Let's get out of here, he said. She looked up at the ceiling and the skylight, the sunlight pouring down on them. Do you have a good pitching arm? She asked John. Of course I do, he said confidently. I was the best in my little league. She pointed to a corner of the skylight. See if you can hit the corner of the skylight with a ball of this stuff. Good idea, he said. John rolled up a baseball-sized amount of the goo and pulled his arm back. But Teresa knew what a proper wind-up looked like, and that wasn't it. John thrust his forearm forward without pushing off of his back foot. The ball of goo didn't even make it halfway. Okay, he admitted. Maybe I wasn't the best in my little league. Teresa stared him down, cocking one eyebrow. All right, maybe I wasn't in little league at all. Teresa was tempted to laugh, but held it in. I got an idea, she said. She took some of the bookshelf pieces and stacked them. Then she placed Barney's front legs into the pile so that she was pointed almost directly up at the corner of the skylight. She took some of the plastic-eating goo and covered the metal grappling hooks with it. Then, after arguing with John about the exact angle Barney should be pointed, she fired. The grappling hooks flew through the air and hit the skylight corner as Teresa had intended. But they didn't stick. They fell to the floor with a clatter. When they looked up, they saw some of the blob had been left on the transparent plastic. The goo began to eat, creating a very sizable hole. Getting ready to fire again, Teresa said. Increased the angle by 5 degrees. John added a few pieces of shelving beneath Barney's feet to increase the angle by what he guessed was almost certainly maybe 5 degrees. They positioned Barney and fired again. This time the hooks flew through the hole and grabbed hold. Teresa gave them a good tug and felt pretty confident that they were securely attached to the metal frame of the skylight. She swung Barney over to the wall and took the driver's seat while John took the other. Okay, she said, as nervous as she was excited. This would be a first. If we fall, John said, judging the distance from floor to the ceiling, we probably won't die. Well, that's reassuring. Teresa told herself not to think about it too much and began to reel in the zip line. In the moments they were climbing up, 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 they were soon suspended in midair, ascending to the ceiling like a spider, pulling itself up by its own web. She really was Spider Girl after all. When they got to the top, they grabbed onto the skylight frame and pulled themselves up onto the roof. Teresa didn't look down, but John couldn't help himself. Wow, you know, we probably would have died if we had fallen. Guess we got lucky. They pulled Bonnie up onto the roof after them. John removed a small steel canister from one of the many pockets of his camouflage army vest. He scooped up the plastic-eating goo that was munching on the skylight, but put it in the canister and sealed the lid tight. This stuff is awesome. I can't wait to show it to my brothers and sisters. Teresa turned around, probably expecting to see nothing on the roof but skylights and solar panels and the skyline of Charleston. But what they discovered on the rooftop of Flax Industries was even more beautiful than the interior of the laboratory itself.